During my junior year of high school, I was competing for a starting position on our varsity football team. Our high school was a 5A high school, and there were over 80 people on our varsity team. So there were plenty of people battling for a starting role. I started the season in a rotation with an upperclassman, but in the 6th game of the season, I locked up the starting position with my best performance of the year. Now, after the game, I went to a hangout at the Methodist church called a Fifth Quarter, and I was still pretty juiced with energy from how well I played. So when they asked me if I wanted to play a pickup game of basketball, I was all about it. This turned out to be a terrible decision because on the very first shot I took in the game, I blew out my knee, ending my football season. I was bummed, but determined to come back stronger and better. When I was rehabbing my knee, they told me that the best rehab for it was swimming. Now, I'd grown up swimming competitively, and our school had a swim team. So I went to the swim coach and asked if I could just come and work out with the swim team to strengthen my knee, and she said yes. Now, I only planned to work out with the team, but she convinced me to compete in the swim meets by telling me I would get to miss a few days of school. So again, I was in. One difference though between working out with the swim team and actually competing is what you wear to compete. In workouts, we would wear what we called a drag suit, which is just normal swim trunks. At a meet though, swimmers wear something much smaller and tighter. They trade the drag suit for something that will reduce the resistance of the water and allow them to go further, faster. You know, when it comes to our faith, often there are things in our lives that make it difficult to fully follow Jesus. They can slow us down and trip us up in our faith journey. But what if there was a way to trade our drag suit, so to say, for a way of living that helped us go further, faster in our faith? In the New Testament book of Hebrews, God used the writer to tell us about many of the men and women of faith who fully followed God and are still remembered today because of their faith. Then he tells us how we can follow their example, starting in Hebrews 12, verse 1. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, since we've seen their example," he says, "let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. It says, now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne." Now, the writer starts by reminding us of those who've gone before us. He wants us to know that not only is it possible for us to follow Jesus, it is incredibly rewarding when we do. He says, we are surrounded by a huge crowd of witnesses. I envision a stadium filled with people of faith who've gone before us, and they are watching in the heavenly realm, cheering us on, wanting you to win. So he tells us, man, run your race, but get rid of the weight. Get rid of the resistance. Anything that slows you down. Now, sometimes it's sin that trips you up, but sometimes it's just the stuff of life that slows you down. Because here's the thing, sin will obviously keep you from fully following Jesus. It will clearly trip us up. The more difficult thing sometimes to get rid of isn't the sin, it's simply the other things that slow us down. Things that slow us down may not even be bad things. They may be neutral or even good things. But we get so busy with the good things that there isn't any room for the God things. Sometimes it's things like hobbies that consume our time and attention. Sometimes it's entertainment or social media. It's those things that we fill our minds with in our downtime that often crowds our minds and our thoughts and keeps us distracted from the race that God wants us to run. You know, often as parents, we feel like we have to set our kids up for success by putting them in all the extracurricular activities and special trainings and special teams, that it causes our busyness to slow us down in our faith race. In some cases, though, it is the sin in our life that trips us up. Sin is anything we do that God doesn't want us to do, but it can also be refusing to do what God has told us to do. Simply put, sin is refusing to submit our will to God or doing things our way instead of God's way. And sometimes we rationalize and justify our sin as, well, it's not that big of a deal, or really it isn't hurting anyone. That's never true. And it's simply a lie that we have believed. Sin is a big deal, and it will always hurt us, and it will also hurt future generations. God tells us if we are going to go further, faster in our faith journey, we must get rid of the weight and the things that will trip us up. And then He tells us to run the race God has given us to run with endurance by keeping your focus on Christ. Look at the way He lived. Follow His example. He goes on to say that the way that Jesus fulfilled His mission was by focusing on what mattered most. He was willing to endure the pain and humiliation of the cross because He was focused on completing His mission of reconnecting us to God by paying the penalty for our sin. Often the reason our faith stalls out is simply because we lose our focus on what matters most. We get distracted chasing success by the world's standard or trying to find purpose and satisfaction in the wrong places. Sometimes as parents, we work hard to set up our kids for a promising academic or athletic future, and in turn compromise their future faith in the process. The reality is, when we lose sight of the ultimate goal of knowing and following Jesus, we can't run the race that God has for us very well. We'll get slowed down and tripped up. If we are going to go further, faster with our faith, we must learn to let go of what's slowing us down and focus on the one who will help us go further, faster in our faith. In your groups, discuss what can slow you down and what are some distractions that can keep you from focusing on what matters most.